My name is Mark Ruffin from SiriusXM Radio. Last year, I had the Miles Davis alumni panel, and someone told me it was like driving a Ferrari. All I had to do was sit back, right? This year, I got the guys with the folks with the heavy equipment, the folks who drive. They not only load the van, but they also drive the van, if you will. They take us where we're going, if you will. Christian McBride told me once that drummers and bass players are like the offensive guards and the tackles in football. You know, nobody really appreciates them until the beat is gone. And we have an illustrious cast of drummers, too. At the far right, Willie Jones, the third, please. An amazing stylistic drummer who also has Barry Gordy in his resume in a way. He has his great record company, right? Karriem Riggins, please. A man who straddles the genres in jazz. The legendary Greg Hutchinson. Legendary. Yes, please. You and Karriem both with Ray Brown, please. That makes you legend. A woman who I saw so many times, maybe 8 or 9 times before I saw her behind a kit. Her name is Shirazette Tinnin, and she's amazing. Shirazette, what is that thing you play that I see you on a lot?
It's called a cajon.
Yeah, it's amazing. She's amazing on it. And one of the rising stars on the drums, without question. This is Allison Miller, please. Allison leads her own band, a great band called Boom Tick Boom, Boom Tick Boom. And she's part of the all-star, all-female group Artemis on Blue Note Records, and you guys are going to hear a lot about Artemis in 2020 for sure. When I thought about this, I didn't know if we would talk about where drums were going or if we're going to talk about drumming techniques. And these folks say either way, let's do that. But let's start with Shirazette. Sorry. I talked to you first, and you set me on my way. When we started talking, you immediately went into electronics and the different sounds that drums are making. Can you tell me how electronics have altered what you do?
So they've altered me in various ways. The first way is when I'm writing for my own project. Instead of me having to wait to get my band together, I can utilize sounds from GarageBand or from Logic just to get a sound bite built upon what it is I'm hearing. And then I'll send out that sound to my group to have them expand upon it before I write a final chart. Because I've learned that nothing is finite. So even if I have an idea, that idea can evolve and re-evolve over a few years. Like, you know, whatever you start with, you might not end up with. As far as when I'm performing, if I'm doing like my own solo project, I did a solo project with Urban Bush Women for Hair and Other Stories, where they asked me to come in and be a solo artist. And I was like, with my band? And they're like, no, by yourself. And I was like, okay, how can I innovate that and get the sounds that I want, that I'm hearing in and out? And so I used my SPD SX, and I wrote a track within Logic and GarageBand, and I orchestrated the track having sounds that I wanted to come in and out, and I would trigger it during my solo, in and out of my solo. And the last way that electronics influenced me is when I'm MDing, I might be responsible not only for bringing the band in, but for triggering sounds. For example, playing with Cross That River, it's an off-Broadway show. And I have to trigger about 9 sounds within the performance. And the sounds are like horses and whips and wind and and you know, carriages and stuff like that. And I have it built in to where I know where I have to trigger it before I cue the band and I hit the trigger. And so my SPD SX has really made my life a lot easier in that aspect.
Are you all composers? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. How do you, Karriem? I mean, you play straight ahead, and you do things with Erykah Badu and Kanye West and all those. How does electronics affect what you do?
I go into the studio and I record drums, actually at a place called NRG in LA. I go and record, I block out a full day and I'll record all the drums. And I record into Ableton. I use Ableton. And I mix each idea different. So, and then I put them on beat. I don't record to BPMs. I put everything on the grid, different tempos. So when I have people come into the studio, instead of having a session when we all playing together, I feel like ideas come faster when people just record to my drums. So yeah, that's kind of my method, using Ableton.
Willie, you play mostly straight ahead, mostly.
Yes.
Do you use electronics in
everything.
composing or in playing with what you do? Not at all?
No, I'm pretty old school. I don't use any electronics. I sit down to the piano and just fool around, try to come up with some pretty chords. And once I find an idea that's melodic, that I think is melodic, then I put it on. I used to put it on tape, but now I put it into my computer, and I'll have somebody write it out for me, and then I'll go to the studio.
Okay, old school. Hutch, I hear you guys got a project coming. Is that true? You two?
Yes.
Is it straddles the line? Is it straight ahead? And
No, we didn't straddle any lines. We went all the way over. But this is, for you guys who don't know, this is a beast right
Yes,
here.
I agree.
For real.
I
And
agree.
this has been my homie for so long, and he's been influential also on me. So it's a combination. That's funny that you say that, because when I came to that session y'all were doing with Common, that's what was happening. The beat
The
was
drums were
playing.
already
I was
there,
like,
yeah.
it is dope. It's kind of, it makes a lot of sense though. But yeah, I'll be at home. You know, since I live overseas, the access to play, like when I lived here in New York, I could just bang on the drums all day in my place. Can't do that in Italy. They take a nap. So anyway, so I'm on Logic, Pro Tools, and I like to actually try and get Logic or Pro, like the drums that I use in Logic, I like to try and get them to sound as, like, if I get them to sound as real as me playing, almost to where people can't tell, then I'll go in and play, but at least I have the option that is there. So if I can make it feel the way I want it to feel, and we're just talking, I'm not talking about, I don't really use this in the process of writing a jazz song, no. For that, we have the piano, but if you're talking about something else, then this is what happens, yeah.
Allison?
I think I'm like a cross between Willie and Greg. I write on the piano, and I use Sibelius, so that's where I put all my music. And then I've just been using Sibelius to hear what I'm writing back, which is kind of torturous, but I do it. And then every once in a while I'll use GarageBand, but I do it in such in kind of an old school way where I'll kind of maybe play piano into GarageBand, and then I'll play bass, because I play bass and vibes. So if I either write on piano, bass, or vibes. So I'll just layer. I'll use GarageBand as like Pro Tools, but just because I don't know how to use Pro Tools. And then, you know, if I'm doing it more of like I do a lot of records where I'm playing to click track, and then I don't like to play to click track, so I would make a beat, and then or percussion or something, and then play over that instead of a click track. And then the other thing that I got introduced to last year actually was Sunhouse Percussion. Which is an incredible, like, check it out if you don't know what Sunhouse Percussion is. It's basically taking electronic drums to the next level, because you can take, it feels like playing a real drum. So you can take one drum and assign sounds all around the drum on the rims, and you run it through your laptop, and you can even change pitches and sounds with how hard you're hitting in one area. It's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's incredible. I did this thing last year through Jazz Night in America and NPR, where they teamed me with Sunhouse, and we just talked about melodic drumming, and they kind of, I would go to their office, and they would kind of, we like made a kit together with actual pitches, and I was able to play real like actual melodies on the drums. It was really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
You want to expound on it, Karriem? You're excited.
Yes, I use them as well as Greg. they also have a feature there where you can record MIDI. So if you're doing a session, you can record all the MIDI information from what you're playing, and then you can stack, MIDI sounds on top of, the actual performance. It's really hip.
Wow. Another way that this panel could go, not only electronics, which could be French to a lot of folks. There's also an incredible new sound, I think, in jazz that behind the scenes, I said, was kind of started by a lot of Texas boys, Houston boys, and these Detroit boys say, hey, wait a minute.
I'm a New Yorker.
No,
I rep
Karriem.
BK all the way. So
Karriem, though, I mean, he's also a big part of whatever this new sound that, as an old school person, I'm really late to the show. I discovered people like Jay Dilla a lot late, but Karriem, you've been working with these people since last century. You've been dwelling into hip hop and the different sounds too.
Yeah, but I think that everyone has their own interpretation of it, which makes it beautiful. Like the guys from Houston and Dallas, they have a beautiful perspective on it. Being from there, in Detroit, we got the Motown vibe, so
Yeah.
we got a different take on it.
Well, before I go on, because a lot of folks may not completely know what I'm talking about, I'd love to know with Allison, who you say you're kind of in the middle, and Willie, have you guys, this new hip hop or this new sound that Chris Dave and all these guys doing, do you incorporate that into straight ahead playing at all? Willie?
No.
Not at
No.
all.
No, not really. But I'm around it, and I appreciate it and love it, because I'm from LA, and I know a lot of the guys like Terrence Martin,
Yep.
Kamasi Washington to a lesser degree, but that's their generation, and I'm very supportive, and they're coming up with some very incredible things, with hip hop and electronics and whatnot.
And melding it with jazz.
Yeah, I may hear something that rhythmically I'm like, okay, I might put that in my playing, but it's straight acoustic.
Yeah. But that's what I meant, the
Yeah.
rhythm. Would you put that rhythm in your
Oh
playing?
yeah, I'm always open to
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
You, Allison?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that we are from where we're from. Like, I'm from D.C. I grew up listening to go-go before jazz. So I'm always, like, the second I play a backbeat, it's going to have more of a go-go swing than anything than a Jay Dilla thing. Although I love that music. I listen to it all the time, and I'm really into this young artist, No Name. And, I'm into the positive message and of that music, and I just think we are what we grew up listening to and our influences, and I think it's impossible to not incorporate all of these things. We're just a melting pot. So for me, I'm a melting pot of like go-go, Prince, and then when I discovered Miles Davis, then I went that direction, and then Ed Blackwell, like. So what do I do with all that, But we are who we are, and I think each of us. I love what you said, Karriem. We're all interpreting it in our own way, and that's the beautiful part of it, is that it's still jazz. Like that is what jazz is. It's just our own self-expression and freedom, and interpreting the music and our emotions how we want, and we have this incredible vehicle of rhythm and drums to do so. Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a real far limb and say that Shirazette is the youngest person up here, okay? Yeah, that's easy.
I just had a birthday yesterday.
Because you were on a Ray Brown record last century. Let's not even go there.
I know I'm older than you because I gave you a lesson once. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, that being said, how important is it as you absorb hip-hop and rhythms, all the modern rhythms, how important is it for you to follow what Willie Jones does and, just stay with the masters and all that?
I think it's important to understand where you come from so that you know what you're doing and how to be innovative. A lot of my peers don't realize that there are a lot of songs that are remakes. And I'm fortunate because I come from an older sibling background. I'm the baby. So I got a lot of experiences from my parents with growing up in the church, listening to the Canton spirituals, checking out Tyrone Davis and understanding the whole Chitlin circuit. So even though I'm the youngest, I have a lot of like old school playing in my soul. You know, I grew up listening to big band and all of the big band drummers and wanting to understand and appreciate that before diving into Tony Williams and experimenting with more progressive and modern playing of styles. And I try to teach that way. And the people that have taught me have always taught me to respect and I'm not saying this negatively, I'm from the South, to respect my elders, you know, and to take in that information so that I can be a part of passing the torch if I'm honored with that. I will say that in order to be creative, you have to understand what came before you, and I think a lot of us are like, oh, yo, this is dope, this is new, and it's like, actually, no, the Running Man was back out in the 90s, and you're doing the Running Man, you know, and that's the Kid and Play, you know, so it was like, and growing up in that hip-hop era, you know, and understanding those bass lines that come from old jazz heads, and you know, being a lover of not only Prince, but, like, I like the Pet Shop Boys, I like Boy George.
You like those drum machine sounds?
I love those drum machine
yeah.
sounds from that era. They're appropriate in the right position, and I I think that's also a learning curve as well, knowing when to utilize your bag of tricks, you know, because not everything works in every scenario, and I think if you really want to play in particular genres, you have to understand the background. Like, a lot of people think that I'm a Peruvian jazz drummer when I first got to New York, and it's like, no, I just took a step back and studied the instrument that it came from, and it came from the cajon. And because I respected it, people were like, oh, you're Peruvian. I'm like, nah, I'm from North Carolina.
You ought to see her on that instrument, though. It is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and people didn't think I played drum set. I was
Right.
like, no, but I played drum set, but I just did my homework. And I think, if anything, from being up here with you guys, is like, wow, this is epic. And not only is it epic, but it says that if you really take your time and pace yourself and study and learn from the people that want to share and help you grow, then you'll get to the next level. But you can't take shortcuts. You know, you can't just expect to play one jazz swing pattern and have it under your belt. It doesn't work like that. You have to sit in something and meditate with it for a while before it becomes part of you, and you don't have to think about it.
Well, you know, through the years of pop music and hip-hop and all that, I've often found that some of the best successful folks in other genres are those who are really based in bebop from the beginning. There's this guy, Bon Iver, who's really hot right now.
Yeah.
Anybody heard of Bon Iver? He was a student at essentially Ellington here at Jazz and Lincoln Center. And it's important, I think, for hip-hoppers and whatever this new drum sound is, for the folks to know who Elvin Jones is as
Right.
well. But I've always wanted to know, Karriem, how did you make that left turn into these new sounds?
I never thought it was a left turn for me because I've been doing it
Did Ray Brown think it was a left turn?
Of course he did. But I was doing it before then. I was doing it since high school, and, you know, to a lot of the elders, they definitely, you know, I let him hear D'Angelo, and he was like, you know, the bass player's dragging, you know. So, you know, that's a different perspective. But, yeah, I've always been into hip-hop and just different genres. I grew up listening to Gentle Giant and just weird, a lot of prog rock, and, you know, and I try to incorporate that in my playing, you know, whether it's jazz or whatever the genre is, just to stay genre-less. That's kind of my approach.
But how did you make the transition professionally? I mean, you can want and put it all in your sound, but you actually do, I mean, have credits with Common and Erykah Badu. And
it's just second nature. It's like she said, we're who we are, what we listen to. And I grew up listening to that stuff, so it was just something that was just in me.
Willie, you grew up listening to that stuff too. You just decided not to put it in what you do.
Yeah, I mean, the era of hip hop that I followed and still follows is like the late 80s. So I was big on Dr. Dre. Too Short.
BDP.
DJ Quick. You know, Ice Cube. So, you know, the SB 1200. You know, I remember those drum sounds. But I mean, but by that time I was already baptized a jazz drummer. I was already Billy Higgins, you know, Tootie Heath. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. But I mean, I was always open. I mean, I still on my iPod or whatever, I still got, you know, like I said, the 80s, 90s, Dr. Dre. I listen to Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah,
He's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, but at the end of the day, you know, I'm swinging. Like that's, you know.
That's what you like.
I mean, you know, but I may have, because I like Jay Dilla and Slum Village, and, you know, Karriem turned me on to all of that, but, you know, it's like maybe a little nuanced thing that I might incorporate into my ride cymbal or drum fill. But, yeah, you are what you do, you know.
Okay, I'm keep you on the spot. I've watched what you've done over the last few years and really admire that you try to help your other jazz musicians by running a record company. That takes heart in these days, you know?
It's an expensive habit.
Yes,
Or hobby, I should say.
Yes. How do you make $2 million in the jazz record business? Start with
3. Right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So, but I mean, as a businessman and as things grow, would you consider if one of your acts decided to work with Karriem and go that way? Would you consider as a record to at least keep your record company?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, like that whole market is foreign to me, so I would have to like get with somebody on the business side to how do you put a product out like that, a project. But yeah, I'm completely open to it. I mean, like Karriem, I mean, he's genius. I don't know if you remember this, but I was playing with Roy, you were still with Ray, but you were getting ready to split. So you were like, man, come up to my room. And he had his beat machine. And for like the next hour, he was like playing these beats for me. Like, I'm working on this. I'm working on this beat. I was like, damn. You know, I mean, it was just incredible. You know, opened my ears.
Wow.
But yeah, I'd be totally open to
Karriem,
the right
help a brother out. Get him.
at the right time.
Whatever you need, man.
Okay, I'm gonna keep you on the spot, Willie, and give you guys some time to think. Top five drummers.
Top 5 drummers?
Well, give me the 5 at this. Give me the 5 at this minute.
You mean like old, like just
Yes.
or like today?
No.
Or?
Total. Your head. Top 5.
Okay, Billy Higgins.
I know it's hard, but give me the 5
Billy
right
Higgins
now.
#1.
Okay.
He the greatest. Philly Joe. R. Blakey, Max. Oh, Elvin.
There you go. And I'm sure I get the top, the same 5 maybe. Okay. Karriem.
It's a hard one, man. In no order, Roy Haynes, Elvin,
Sorry, Willie.
Tony, Philly Joe, Jimmy Cobb, Gregory
Kind of
Hutchinson,
the same thing. That's a hard one.
Willie Jones.
Philly Joe, like we come from the same. So Philly. Well, since they named though, let's go back then. Like let's go like Chick Webb.
Yes.
Let's go back old school, Papa Joe, because we would say the same thing. So, Sonny Payne. I mean, you can't really.
Yeah.
Which you want to talk? Top 5 big band drummers,
Right,
top 5
exactly.
bebop drummers, post bop. It's hard to really. You can't. You can't. That's a hard one.
Well,
wow.
just evoking their spirit is a hip
Yeah.
thing. Okay, so Shirazette.
All right, I'm gonna name some funk drummers. Clyde, Stubblefield.
Yeah.
Prince's drummer, he just passed away. What's his name? John Blackwell. I love Terry Lynn.
Yeah. Yes.
And Cindy. And from the big band era, I would have to say Buddy, even with his attitude, Buddy.
They've named all of the they've already been named. I mean, I'll add Ed Blackwell, which I mentioned before. Huge for me, Ed Blackwell and Billy Higgins, Roy Haynes, Tony Elvin. I mean, I'll add Victor Lewis, Al Foster. I love Victor and Al.
Those who are with us.
Billy Hart.
Yeah.
I mean, those are. Anytime I get a chance to see those three, it's like mind blowing. You know, deep.
I mean, Ndugu Chancellor.
Oh, Ndugu. Talk about diverse.
Yes.
Ndugu.
Yeah. You know, I remember with Ndugu, those rototoms. Man, those things are. What happened to rototoms? Do people still play
It's too
them?
expensive to carry all that shit on the
They're
road.
the drum
man.
machine.
Rototoms.
They were bad though. Yeah.
Talk about go-go. Rototoms.
Right?
Who?
Go-go swing. That's all about the rototom.
Wow. Okay. I guess we could take some questions if there, because I see there are some drummers out here. Jerome Jennings back there. But wait, maybe before we do, because I'm really interested in what you guys are doing. I want to talk about Artemis a little bit. But what are you guys doing, you two?
Well, let's see. I'd never put out a record, and I didn't have an idea. I just know no offense to what I'm about to say, man. I'm going to get blasted on this, but I really don't care. I didn't want to do a jazz record.
No,
What's wrong with that?
I got to play with all the masters, and plus I saw all Tane and everybody's putting out jazz records. I wanted to do something different and something that people. I grew up before I was playing jazz drums. My family's from the Caribbean, so I grew up playing reggae and this kind of stuff. So I wanted to do something. It's not a reggae record, but I wanted to do something that was representative of my time growing up. You know, I'm from New York. I'm from Brooklyn. You know, which is at one time Brooklyn. We was putting out the hottest hip hop.
Yeah.
You know, the New York sound that was influencing everything. So I wanted to rep that too. You know, I lived around the corner from Biggie, so this is all what I wanted to show, and I wanted to do a record and I knew Anderson's record is out. Chris put a record out, so Karriem's got multiple records out, so I have a good kind of map, and then I said, okay, well, where can I fit in and do my thing? So we set about doing that along with the help of my other homeboy. He's over in the corner, Clarence Penn, who's a bad dude. So I said, okay, we got to it. I did a bunch of music, and Mr. Ears here, he can take anything, and from the initial point that you give it to him, after it's done to what comes back is I call masterful, like really, really masterful. And I don't say that lightly. Like this dude hears, like you hear one thing and it's banging. I'm like, this is banging. Karriem's like, yes, banging. And then I give it to him and it comes back and I'm like, damn, that's banging. And so we do that, and I learned a lot in this process, man. It's something I had never undertaken before, and now I understand why I just want to play the drums and just do, because that's you got to have a whole, like just dealing with record company and all this stuff, it's a lot of stuff. But in the end, we still have the music is pretty much done. I was just telling them, it's like tinkering also. It's like you finish something, and if you don't just let it go, you can easily tinker because you think,
forever.
Okay, yeah,
yes.
And so I've been tinkering. So now it's time to put it out and time to get to work. So
let it go.
Yeah, let it go.
He's extremely versatile, man. Not only is he playing drums, he's rapping, he's singing. Whoa. And, you know, I learned a whole new side of him.
Jazz Police gonna get me. No more Jazz Police. I don't care.
And you're in Jazz Police headquarters, too, okay?
Ask me, do I care? I don't.
Is it coming soon? Do you?
Yeah, it's coming soon. It's gonna be this year for sure.
Yep.
I'm gonna set a deadline, man. We gotta get it by June. My birthday, turn 50 this year. We're gonna have a big party, and we're gonna do it up right here in New York. Get Jen to book a spot, and we're gonna do it up, man. Yeah.
All right.
So
I'm gonna skip over and go to Willie because I love what Willie does too with the record company. You got anything new? What's happening with you?
Next week, I'm going in the studio to do a new project, celebrating Roy Hargrove, recently passed. Larry Willis, who recently passed. And also, it's funny you mentioned Ndugu because I'm gonna celebrate him too.
Yeah, L.A.
You know,
LA.
L.A. He was
Yeah,
one of
man.
my first drum heroes.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm just gonna do that next week.
What about other folks on your label? Are you really like? Are there any more artists on?
I'm leaving
Coming?
here. I'm going into the studio today to record T.L. Joe's Avery.
Ah, yeah.
And I got Ralph Moore also. So
Right.
we're going in the studio in a couple of months.
How many records? How many records you got on your label?
19.
What's the name of the 19? Man. What's the name of the label?
WJ3 Records.
Okay, I'm really gonna embarrass you, Willie. I'm sorry. Did anybody see the New York Times spread on Sunday with Willie Jones, At Home with Willie Jones? Anybody see that?
No.
Google it. It is incredible. Look into Willie's life. Okay, in the New York Times. Sorry, dude. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, before I get to Karriem, I'm gonna get to the lovely women. I love what Allison's doing. First, tell folks a little bit about Boom Tick Boom, and then about the new all-star group you're a part of.
Yeah, Boom Tick Boom is started as it started about 12 years ago, and it started as just I wrote a bunch of music, and I was like, okay, now what do I do with it? So I got this band together. It started as a trio with the great Myra Melford on piano and Todd Sikafus on bass, and then it's now, as my passion for composing has grown, it's now a sextet, and we've been together for 12 years. We have 5 records out, and it's all my writing and arranging, and it's violin, clarinet, cornet, bass, drums, and piano. And I just, I have to say, I really just started the band because I wrote some music, and I fell in love with composing, and I love classical music as well. So it's kind of like, I guess, it's like a melting pot of all the music I love. It's like chamber jazz, but then there's some funk in there, and some klezmer-esque music.
Wow.
I mean, it's just a hodgepodge of things. We played last night I did Boom Tick Boom and Artemis at LPR.
Wow.
It was pretty fun. But yeah, for that, I had a new record come out last year, and next week I'm actually premiering a new suite of music that I got a commission for through Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation, and it's a piece called In Our Veins, and it's about the waterways of America and social change. And it is premiering. We start next week a tour that goes kind of up the East Coast, and I love working with dancers and choreographers. I work a lot with Camille A. Brown, and this show I've written for tap dance. Tap is incorporated into the band and video. So that's, I'm a little overwhelmed, but it's great.
And
I think
Artemis?
that with having 2 children under 5 is a little bit like, oh.
And Artemis?
Artemis is I don't know what to say about Artemis. I love this band. Please check it out. It's Rini, the masterful Rini Rosnes started this band, and it's like we are just 7 women having a great time playing music together on a really high level and honoring the tradition, but we've all written music for the band. We're all composing for the band, and it's a true collective. It's Rini, Anat Cohen, Melissa Aldana, Ingrid Jensen, Noriko Ueda, and myself, and then sometimes Cecile McLaurin-Salvant joins us. She's on the record. We have a record coming out with Blue Note, who've been very supportive, and we're really excited about it.
Pretty international too.
It's totally
Yeah.
international. I'm the American.
Couple Canadians.
American. Couple Canadians, Japan. Cecile's
Got that
kind of
Haiti
from
French
both.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She grew up in Miami, but she's got a lot going on, and Melissa's from Chile.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Shirazette, you're a busy young woman. What's up with you right now?
Well, the reason why I have a cold is because of APAP. No. I've been running around like a chicken with my head cut off, but I was blessed with an opportunity to go to LA starting in February for 3 months under a fellowship called Make Jazz Fellowship, where I get to focus on me for once, because I don't know if you guys have this balance thing by being a drummer, but you know, it's a blessing and it's a curse to play with everybody and then have time to compose and write for your own project and to be seen as an individual artist. So that'll give me an opportunity to do that, and that starts in February. I was supposed to come out with my third album with my more not jazz project called Sonic Wallpaper. It was gonna release last October, but my mother passed in June, so I postponed it because I was gonna release it on her birthday. But I'm going to do the due diligence of releasing it again this year on her birthday. I am working with a dance company as well, Urban Bush Women, and I'm contracted with them for the next 3 years, and they've created this whole piece where I've written the percussion sounds. So I dive from drum set to the floor, playing on the floor, and then I put on my marching snare drum, which I haven't done since I was like 18. So that was a little intense, getting back into that core strength that I lost. Gotta find that. So I'm working with them, and I'm involved with various artists. I just got the opportunity to finally play with a wonderful vocalist, Alicia Alatuja, and that was a beautiful experience. We're gonna do more of that, and I'm just, you know, trying to see where life is gonna take me now. Because honestly, like, having that responsibility of my parents for so long, because my dad passed away 3 years ago of cancer, so I had a lot of weight to carry, you know. So it was like, I don't really have enough time to really invest in my own project because I had to invest in them. But they've blessed me with this newfound freedom, and so I'm just trying to do as much as possible. And I'm working with Toshi, thanks to Allison, like, believing in me, but 9 years ago. I've only lived in New York for maybe 10 years, and before that I was in Chicago. And so, yeah, I'm busy and I'm loving it, and I'm just looking for balance.
Karriem, I know, man, your schedule is crazy. Crazy. So what are you doing?
Right now, I'm just working on my album, not doing much touring. I'm like 7 songs in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working on that and working on getting the band together to tour. So the music is all over the place. So I'm looking, you know, to hopefully have everything out, you know, in the spring.
When you say music's all over the place, you're talking about your record.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so when you say all over the place, does that mean acoustic bebop somewhere?
Yeah, I
in there
mean,
too?
some of it's jazz, some of it's mixing classical with funk, and it's just everything that I love on there. And it's featuring artists like Common, he's on there. Nora Jones is on there. And yeah, so it's coming together.
Man, I find it fascinating how many jazz guys are working with the hip-hop guys. I mean, Anderson .Paak is pretty much, I saw Anderson .Paak the other day. It was Maurice Brown and Ben Williams and... Oh, no, but right. Oh, no. But I saw him with pretty much a jazz band, and the rhythms, those new modern rhythms, seem to work with any kind of funk thing that they were putting down, you know? He's a bad dude. Right.
So I didn't answer the question you asked before because I just wanted to be real careful how I answered it. There's a vocabulary that I spend my life learning how to play, right?
Yes.
Which is not a hip-hop vocabulary.
Nope.
Right? So we got to, and listen, I'm not hating. It's just there's a vocabulary, understand, right? It's like learning to speak a language. There's a vocabulary that we use. So jazz vocabulary, when I think about that, and it doesn't say that there's not room for other things in it, but in that aspect, I guess, my man, at the end, we all come from this cloth, but we can't dismiss, like,
I agree. Yep.
like the hours of Will Cox and all this shit.
Ted Reed.
That's not
That's
a
right.
bunch of 30-second notes in a 4-measure phrase. We're not doing that. So let's be. I always, and I'm very careful about this because I don't want to offend anyone, but it's a different game. Like, because learning to swing is a whole nother animal, right?
Yes.
So as the same as learning to play a backbeat on hip hop. And so, and in that aspect, there's not too many cats that can really do it. Really. That can swing, really swing, and then really go on the other side.
Right.
There's very few.
Well,
Very few.
I'm
And so I'll leave it
instigating,
at
dude.
that.
No,
Right?
no.
But
No,
I can go in, but
no.
I'm not.
They're pretty
No.
much in this room.
No, I'm
What they can
instigating.
do.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's a different thing, man.
Okay, but who can Chris Dave? Can Chris Dave?
Yeah, but I
swing
see. I knew Chris back. Everybody knows Chris used to play. Chris, when I first met Chris was swinging a bunch. Chris is a different animal though. So I don't. When we talk about Chris, that's a whole other thing. Chris is crazy.
Why is he a different animal?
He's a different because some people hear things. Chris hears shit. He hears the drums. But he hears a sound that we trying to program. He hear that shit to play it.
Yes, that's it's
That's a different thing.
mind-blowing,
But
yeah.
Chris could swing too, though.
Right.
So he played with Kenny Garrett.
Right,
And
right.
when I first met Chris, I met Chris and Glasper in Houston at the IAJE convention.
Mm-hmm.
When I was I think we might have been, maybe we were there with Roy or somebody. And that's how I met Chris. And that was on some swing. Eric Harlan too. Eric Harlan was, Eric
Yeah.
Harlan still swings. But there's a vocabulary that we're talking about. So I always want to put that out there. It's not taken away from anything that anyone does. But if you sit down and you play me some Will Coxon and you go through that shit, then we can talk. But until that, there's a different thing, like if you're listening to Blakey or you listen to the Max or Philly, any of the greats, that's a vocabulary.
Right.
And we
right.
can't, so we got to be real careful when you talk about this new sound in jazz. Real careful. Because does it do, I look at it as that's a different, jazz is huge, right?
Yes.
It's a huge idiom,
Yes.
but that to me is a different thing. So we have to come up with another name for that. I don't know. I'm old school. This is where maybe I get old school. You see my age coming out here. Like, and we've all sat up here with different people. These guys I know for sure because we've pretty much shared the same gigs. With Roy, with Ray Brown, with me and you, me and him, we just
This
pass
dude
gigs to
put
each
me
other.
on almost every gig I've been
No,
on.
but we pass gigs to each other, and you put me on with Common, so that's good. But the thing is, if I didn't understand the vocabulary of how to go in and play some hip hop, it wouldn't
Yes,
have worked,
right,
and I wouldn't
right.
even have tried to do it.
Right.
So it's very. We want to be respectful of all the genres, but we definitely want to be respectful of this vocabulary. It took me so damn long to try and just get a grasp of that. I'm still trying to grasp. You know what I'm saying?
Yep,
I'm still trying to get the perfect ride symbol for the swing. I'm still trying to get the perfect phrasing, the perfect solo, and it's never going to happen. But I'm still trying. And that's in the idiom of swing. So
No, another young drummer is making a lot of noise. I was trying to get him here. Is Micaiah McCraven. Okay, and Micaiah, I mean, of course he's a swinger, but his thing is totally different than what Chris Dave and the Texas drummers are doing. He got a whole new sound. I can't describe it.
everybody's so different. I mean,
Microphone.
everybody's so different. I mean, everyone up here, just look at what we got right here. We have
Yes.
diversity in not only music, in life, but in the drums. So hopefully that's the thing. That's what I guess that was my main point also going back to. There's a sense of being an individual in what I do. So I don't copy. I'm not trying to play the same kind of fills going into the chorus, coming out. If we're talking about other music that everybody else is doing. And that is a problem that I have with popular music now. When you listen to the drummers, everybody sounds the same. Like if I put on a record and you listen, you know what I'm saying? Look, thank you. She's clapping in the back. She's clapping in the back. So if you put on me, him, and him are three different drummers that play a vocabulary a certain way. Even if we play the backbeat, we're still going to be different because we understand how to be different. But if you put on, you go and watch some YouTube videos. Go watch them. And that's a problem. Too many people watch those damn videos and they want to play all that stuff.
Yes.
And as a good friend of mine, I was talking about this the other day. If you want to let's talk about the evolution of drumming in terms of popular, like the young cats coming up. I went to school with Gerald Haywood. that's the evolution. That's the beginning of what you hear. When you hear, Gerald comes before Aaron Spears, all of those other guys, right? Gerald, when I was in high school, Gerald was already on the road with Blackstreet. He was already doing all these other groups, right? So the one thing Gerald always said to me, Hutch, they don't pay me to play those fills. They pay me to play 2 and 4. Now he could do all that. He's huge into the music. He said it like that. Little John, same thing. Little John asked John, man, he said, bro, they pay me to play a backbeat 2 and 4. The fills, I don't need to do all that. The cha-ching, cha-ching, that's it, right? What we talking about? Okay, so then what? Then what? So I'm not hating, and the evolution has to happen, and I understand that, but it's got to be funky though, and it's got to feel good. It's like dancing with somebody. You dancing with your partner, and all of a sudden, it's like young people now. When they dance, you watch how they dance.
Yeah.
You go to a club, it's like, damn, why did we come to the club together, baby? Because we dancing together, or you break dancing? Because all that shit is cool, but are we in this? Are we on? Damn, wait. Let me that's how it feels. Like everybody, the drummers go for self, and that's supposed to make the show. The more flashier you can be. I'm old school. Steve Jordan. Give me some Steve Jordan, man.
Yeah.
Give me some Omar Keem.
Oh man.
Give me some Dennis. You know.
You mentioned Steve Dennis Chambers. You were about
Dennis,
to say
yeah, Dennis just play a good.
Yeah,
Dennis is perfect.
Yeah.
You know, all that P-Funk stuff.
Oh yeah.
You can't get no funkier than that.
You know, John Mayer's so big, that little trio he had, but I think that trio wouldn't have been anything without Steve Jordan right there kicking it up, you know?
Yeah, he's funky.
Right. Okay, now we have questions, but you are going to have to come up to the mic. If you have a question, you're going to have to come up to the mic, please.
It needs to be said.
Name where you're from, please,
yeah,
too.
Totally.
Okay, so my name's Yvonne Mendez. I work at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. I actually host panel discussions like this to forward the movement of jazz, to create more intimate spaces for patrons to connect to jazz and jazz artists. So I do that and other genres as well. But I have a two-part question. I want the panel to talk about the history of Latin rhythms in jazz. I feel like Mario Bausa, and we were talking about swinging, I feel like that's a big part of it, and I haven't seen that talked about really on these panels, like just calling in the Tito Puentes and.
Okay, wait, and what's your second part before we get to that?
Corey Fonville, Winard Harper, I love you, all of you. I mean, the work, Toshi Rakin, I'm, familiar with. A lot of that stuff. One of the panels I did was about drummers, not just keeping time, but actually being trendsetters, and it was a homage to Max Roach.
Nice.
We included Terry Lynn Carrington, Micaiah McCraven was on my panel. So I just wanted to say that you guys are trendsetters. I think that's great. In the past, it was always the drummer in the back, but I feel like now the drummers are up front.
Okay, first of all, my kid graduated from Elmhurst Grade School, okay? And one reason we're not talking about the Latin, because that wasn't the topic of the panel. But if you guys want to expound anything on that?
I got a chance to go when I was in Roy Hargrove's band to Cuba.
Yeah.
And we spent, I want to say, a month there, or a little less than a month. And I got to study with Chunguito and around Chucho Valdez, and got to go hear Les Van Van and groups around. And I learned a lot of rhythms there. So I had a whole new respect for the music. I was like 96.
I would say that maybe Peru gets slept on a lot because there is a huge African population due to the slave trade, how everything happened. The difference is, however, I learned by studying with Wevy Pato Lobaton, Gabriel Alegria, and Hugo Alcazar, that the Peruvian rhythms are actually less diluted than the rhythms that came over to America, because they were treated differently. They were given more freedom to still keep their personal experiences from Africa, because they were conquered by Spain instead of by the Westerners that were taught by not the Brazilians, Portuguese. So the Portuguese were a lot more harsh, but the Spaniards weren't. And because of that, they gave them guitars along with the drums that they created from the crates on the ships that they were traveling by. And that crate became what's called the cajon. And there's also a cajita, which is a smaller box that looks like a Catholic box that you put money in. So all the African slaves that were dropped off in Peru turned those rhythms into those boxes, and out of those rhythms you have festeo, you have lando, you have marinera, and all of these rhythms are based off of dance, which are really important because, you know, we're talking about how people don't really dance anymore when they're playing music. But that art form is still there within a lot of the African Peruvian sound. And I think it's important, if you want to explore more, to check out Peru Negro and Chocolate. They're percussionists, and Peru Negro is a group that includes all those rhythms that you might find interesting. Because that's another connection. When we usually talk about Latin, we're really quick to go to the 2/3 and the 3/2 claves, the rumbas and the sones, but we forget about other Latin influences like the Brazilian and the Peruvian and all the right. And also, like, I just came back from South Africa, and that's you know, like, that's a whole world within itself that uses the traditional clave of where, you know, it all came from before we all got dispersed. So that's a great
There's a new Afro-Peruvian group of women. You know about this band? I can't.
No, I don't.
I know. Well, the leader's a bass player from Chicago, Matt Garrity, but they're based in New York, and I wish I could.
Oh, cool.
I wish I could think of their name, but yes, Afro-Peruvian is huge.
Yeah.
The great Karen Kennedy.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everybody. This is great. You guys, you know, because I'd like to say we grew up together, but then I was actually older than them. It's exciting to see your voices and hear your voices. And you guys all talk about all of the opportunities that you had to develop who you were as an individual, as a human being, and be able to display that within your work. And you guys are all talking about how important that's been. And I'm curious to know who, and you've been mentored by, you know, some pretty special folks. I'm curious to know who, if anyone, you guys are mentoring, whether it's in a very tangible way or whether it's through the work that you do and you have some kind of conversation going on with others.
Mentoring others? Yes. Well, I'll just quit. You know, for me, it's teaching. I mean, I come from the Michael Karriem School of Drumming, and it's like each one teach one, and really the only way to become a master musician is to pass it on. So I took that, you know, Karriem. We were talking about Karriem. Speaking
Yes,
of
we
Houston,
were.
we were talking about Karriem before the panel. Last time I saw Karriem was in this room, actually, and then he moved to LA. But you know, I was scared of Karriem, like every lesson, but everything he said, he changed my life. Talk about, I'm not going to go into this because I know that's not the question, but talk about Wilcoxon, you know, like Michael Karriem studied with Philly Joe, and Philly Joe studied with Charles Wilcoxon, and like he used that book. This is this book that we all have dedicated our life to, one of the books. He used that book to help me discover just confidence. You know, so he really changed my life, and the dance, the ride, you know, and but he really instilled in me this importance of passing on the tradition. So for me, I now teach at the new school, and I'm a little old school too when it comes to the swing, and I teach. You know, I get these students in, and all of their favorite drummers are like under 40. They come in, and I'm like, wait a minute, you know, and they can play in any meter that they want to play in, but they can't play, you know, 4 bars of a quarter note, a swinging quarter note on the ride. So I teach proficiency. So I teach, like, they come to me first, and I get to them, and I just focus on swinging, you know, and I think it's really important. Even if you don't end up doing that, it gives you such a strong foundation as a drummer, as a jazz drummer, to then go. It makes it so everything you do will feel good, and will make people want to dance when you play. So for me, that's kind of where I'm mentoring, and I'm starting to. I realized all of a sudden I like woke up and I was like, wow, I'm 45. How did that happen? Okay, so then I'm like, okay, I think I need to start hiring younger musicians. I'm the older musician now, so now I'm hiring. I've been hiring a young bassist that just is actually, I think he's still at the new school, but he took some time off. Really great young bassist, Nick Dunstan, and I've been hiring him. And I'm just trying to really, and I do a lot of stuff with young women. I think it's really important. There are some insanely talented young women coming up in jazz. Like, it's unbelievable. Last year I was Derek Hodge and I were the artists in residence for Monterey Jazz.
Yes.
And, and one of the best part of that is, besides, becoming dear friends with Derek, who's just an amazing human being, was mentoring and teaching these students and hearing these students.
I was in Monterey. Those kids were ridiculous.
They were ridiculous.
Oh my
like,
God.
I can't, I know.
Crazy.
I mean, I was so inspired. So, yeah, I guess that's how I'm mentoring. I think it's really important.
Anybody else want to tackle that?
I do a lot of teaching. Oh, go ahead.
No, you
Ladies
go.
first.
No, you-
Ladies first. No, I do a lot of teaching, but it was funny yesterday to sit on the panel with my mentor, with Betty Carter, and
With who?
with on the panel sitting next to Kenny,
Oh,
and that was my mentor, Kenny Washington, and a great man who used to be the head here at LaGuardia, and who's so influential for so many people in the music, not just jazz, but every genre. He's responsible for Marcus Miller, Steve Jordan, Sterling Campbell, and his name is Justin DeChocho.
yes, Justin.
And those two, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those two guys. First, Justin, for basically, I showed up to audition at LaGuardia, the last person on the last day of auditions, and I didn't get in. And talk about a chip. Don't get me with a chip. So I had a chip on my shoulder, and I still have it. But he realized the mistake he made. So basically, me not getting into LaGuardia meant that I had a full scholarship at Manhattan School of Music. So I'll take that.
Okay, yeah.
So through the two of them, I learned exactly what Allison's saying, that we pass it on. So I'm going to do one of those things that Peter Martin always tells me. We put out these videos with Open Studio Network.
Yes.
And I've always wanted to do something like that. And through Peter Martin, who's a great pianist, a good friend of mine, a good friend of all of ours, we're able to continue this and try and reach a broader audience. But I love teaching. I do lessons all the time. But music is really, I try and tell people this, like, your life is how you play. What you live is what you will play. If you haven't lived it, you can't play it. If you've never had the blues, you can't sit down and learn how to play the blues. You got to go through some shit.
Yeah.
Right? So just be patient. Young people, be patient coming up. Play where you are. Aspire to be ahead, but this is some stuff that you can't do because you haven't lived it. So, and these are important things. So I try and pass these on to students, and then let them understand about, everyone wants to come to New York. I want to go to New York. I want to go to New York. That was great back in like the 80s, early 90s, where you couldn't afford to live in New York.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. How many young guys can come here and can afford to live comfortably, young guys and young ladies, can afford to live comfortably and try and play music? It ain't the same.
Hutch, I'm from Chicago. I moved here 13 years ago. I didn't understand why New York musicians and other musicians moved to Chicago until I moved here.
You see where I moved? Way away.
Until I moved here, then I totally got it. I mean, they get more at the door in Chicago than they do here.
Yeah, I mean, you come
it's
here.
It's a shame that they're playing for the
I
door
tell the
here.
students now, man, go get what you need to get. It's great for your peers. You meet your peers here, but it's a different time.
Yeah.
Also, like I said, I see the great Ralph Peterson sitting over there. Many times I got to talk to Ralph, or I go into Bradley's and be hanging out with A.T.
I've heard about
Blakey.
Bradley's.
Blakey would
Yeah.
come in and we'd have a conversation. of all places, in the men's room.
I can't go
What are we
in there.
talking? No, don't even. We'll leave that alone.
Okay.
But this kind of mentorship was possible. I think, and let me just touch this for real quick. We have to not be afraid to tell somebody when they're bullshitting. And that's the
Yeah.
problem now. My generation, we play it safe. We don't criticize cats for the way we should. Whereas,
Oh,
like,
I've heard
I
the
had
Bradley stories.
Kenny, I had all these
Yeah,
dudes,
yeah, yeah.
and like, I didn't, they would check me if something wasn't
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
That's why the music sounds the way it does now, because we don't check people when it ain't right. And we need to check them because you can't dumb down this music. I'm sorry. This is one of the things you just can't
That's
dumb
right,
down.
that's right.
And if you're going to be not taking it seriously or not representing the way you should, then somebody should check you so that you don't continue to follow the wrong path, And that's very important. That's really what mentoring is. It's not teaching you how to play the drums. Is if I see you doing something wrong, I should check you on it and not just let you go. Because
Speaking of Michael Karriem, you told a great Michael Karriem story when he first.
he checked me. He checked me in Drummer's World, And this is something that probably people do it all the time. So I went in. He's there. We just hang. See, look.
Yep.
So he said, "How you doing, young man?" I said, "I'm hanging." I didn't think anything of it. Gave him 2 seconds. He put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "What'd you say?" I said, "I'm hanging." He said, "Don't you ever say that. A black man should never say I'm hanging." And at the time, I was so young, I didn't get it. I'm like, "Damn, Michael, chill, man." Like,
And that
what's
had
going
nothing to
on?
do
Like,
with drumming, but everything to do with mentoring.
it just had to do with,
Yeah, yeah,
checking,
yeah.
like, the history, like, who
Yeah.
you are and what that really means. Like, sometimes we say things, we really don't know what it, so to say I'm hanging, like, he was like, "Don't ever say," and then it scared the mess out of me, because 1 second he was that way, and the next second he was like, "So Greg, man, what's going on?" I was like, "I'm cool."
That's mentoring. we got some more questions. Name and where you from, please.
My name is Mateo. I'm
Where
from
you from?
Colombia.
Okay.
So my question is, for you, what would be the limit to incorporate traditional rhythms from other percussion instruments into the drums in the jazz context? Thank you.
What would be the limit?
Yeah, to play in the drums the traditional rhythms of other percussion instruments.
Oh, okay.
There is no limit, is there?
I don't think there's a limit. I think it's just about being tasteful and within your orchestration of it, Like, people do hybrids and blends all the time, but I think that goes back to understanding the foundation of the history of what it is you're trying to do. And if you do your homework and study, I think you'll know what your limit is. It's like, how many cups of coffee? 1, 2, 3? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just trial and error.
Thank you.
The great Ralph Peterson.
Thank you. First of all, I can't tell you how good it is to see all you being recognized for having achieved your levels of mastery because of the work you put in. My question speaks to this age of technology and comes from the mentoring thing and the student's ability to collect. Like, what's the difference for y'all between being a person who collects a lot of music and a person who knows a lot of music? And how the technology can be a double-edged sword in thinking that just because you carry around 8, 10, 30,000 tunes in your phone that you know something about any of the music that you're carrying around. I mean, if you have enough money to buy a Picasso and a Renoir and a Van Gogh and put them up in your house, does that mean you know anything about painting?
You said, bro. You said it. Listen, that's right.
You
Listen.
already said it.
It was a different thing, right, Ralph? When when I was in high school, man, you had to save the money. I had to save the money to get that Blakey print, and I had to go find it, and it meant something. Technology really messed a lot of things up, man.
Wow,
A lot of people, a lot of, because you don't do the research.
Yeah.
You don't know. You said it. You said it. You asked it and answered it. just because you have it doesn't mean anything. Like cats got a lot of records, they don't know. Like there's one person I know who knows every single record in his collection, KW. And he ain't playing. Not only does he know it, he'll whistle you a solo off of any record. But that's what I don't have that. I have records,
serial
but
numbers.
I'm saying, man, tell you where the record date was, what they were wearing.
Dude, Marcus Miller got so many stories about
Man,
Kenny
this
Washington
dude,
when they were kids.
Let me tell you, going to his house and studying like the record collection was crazy. And I walk in, I just be like, damn, he know every record. And like each time I walked in, it'd just be a different record playing. He just play it for me. And like, you know this one? I'm like, nah, man, you gotta know this record, man. And but that's what we talking about. Like, so it made me understand that just because you collect, you gotta listen to what you collect. Like, you can't just have the stuff and not know what's on there because.
You also, I mean, in addition to that, you need to listen to it and seek out the musicians who are still around. Like maybe go see them live. You know, like, I mean, we're all music collectors, but I mean, I had an opportunity to see Art Blakey at Catalina's in LA, and I passed on it, you know, because I wanted to hang out with some friends of mine. I'm like, oh, he'll be back. And he died like a couple of months, you know, and Billy Higgins was like, you know, what's wrong with you? So from that point on, I was always, Max Roach come to town, I'm there. Tootie Heath, Roy Haynes, I'm there.
Yeah.
You know, and I try to hang out with them because it's one thing to like, well now with YouTube and technology, you can just push a button and you can see a performance, but it's not the same as being able to talk to them, you know, get their life experiences and get the advice that they would, or information that they'll pass on to you. It's priceless.
Well, you know, that's a whole nother panel about how the mentoring thing in jazz is broken down. Outside New York City, if you live in New York City, you can still see, go talk to Willie Jones, but outside, it's kind of hard. Another question, please.
I just want to say
sorry, Allison.
just two things is I think another problem, you know, like to go see the masters who are still alive. Like when I moved to New York, you could just go to the Vanguard and say, I'm a student, or I'm young, you know, I'm a young musician. And I remember going to see Billy Higgins and going every night, every set, and sitting right in front of Billy Higgins. And I didn't pay, I bought a drink. That's all I had to do. Like, they just let me in. And I think that's a problem. Like, my students, they can't, well, I mean, I'm saying this, and they're going to a school that costs like 60 grand a year, but like, they say they can't afford to come to a show, you know? And then my other point that I was going to say with what Ralph said is like, I had something really alarming happen to me this semester in school. I teach this class called Super Trios. It's a piano trio class. And we were sitting around and listening to some music, and every single student in my class confessed that they had never listened to a record from beginning to end.
Wow.
Oh.
And these are kids who are going to higher education for jazz drumming.
That's crazy.
Not drumming, for jazz. And they had actually never listened to a record from beginning to end because they only listen on Spotify and streaming. Yeah. Yeah. And that was deep to me because, like, that was my life. You know, like Greg's talking about finding that record, listening to that record over and over and over again, knowing
Plus the gist of an album sometimes.
the story.
The arc, and
Exactly.
yeah,
That shocked
That's
me, and
horrible.
I was like, okay,
That's
something needs to change.
we got 90 seconds. I'm sorry,
Alright,
sir, but go ahead.
My name is Daniel. I'm from Queens. I'm studying at City College. I mean, just thank you for being here. What I'm trying to do is like mix different cultures and different rhythms from different around the world, and Cuba, Fela Kuti, Afrobeat, all this stuff like that. And I'm just trying to see how y'all mix different rhythms into one sound instead of just playing, oh, I'm playing this one day, and instead of, you know, separating it, how y'all go about putting it together into a collective, your own being.
That's hard.
Yeah, I think so. So you're asking how we take different worlds and blend them together in one gig?
I mean, it's individual too. I know, you know.
Oh, okay. So, all right, if I'm playing an Afro-Peruvian gig, I only play those rhythms related to that. But within my own project, if I'm intentionally doing a hybrid, I'll take like a festeo and put it against like a hip-hop groove, like to experiment. you know. So even like with tabla, I'll take tabla rhythms like da da te te da 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 da, you know, tere kita da da, and I might put it on top of like Steve Smith was doing that.
Yeah,
with,
Steve Smith's really
you know,
good at it.
Yeah,
Yep.
he does that a lot.
Yep.
So it's similar to that. Like I learned to do that from listening to those guys, with you know, Ravi Shankar and all those cats. So I think the thing that we are afraid of is being afraid of trying new stuff because we're worried about what people are gonna think. You can't do that because Miles wouldn't be Miles Davis if he didn't.
That's right.
You know.
Or you couldn't get in Miles Davis's band if you were like that.
Exactly. You can't be timid. So I can't really answer that for you. You just have to go and take this band and try it out. And if it doesn't work, you'd be like, oh, well, I tried. You know what I'm saying? So,
Guys, I'm overtime. If you have one quick question and we get a quick answer, I'm overtime. Please don't make it long.
Yeah, my name is Oscar. I'm from Los Angeles. I moved to New York in 1976. You're talking about Michael Carvin. I was mentored by him as a kid growing up in Los Angeles. Billy Higgins too, well, the world stage.
Yes, sir.
Yep. And question I had, one thing I didn't hear today was conversation and music. The responsibility the drummers have in when they're playing in the rhythm section, the cohesion, and the call and response. You know, listening to a soloist, how you implement that in your playing.
Well, I think that's like, I'll just step in real quick. I think that's why we all play jazz, is for that conversation, that dialogue that happens, that magic that happens on stage. And I think that goes along with with what Hutch was talking about like let's not pretend that this like the Wilcoxon and the time and the language and the vocabulary the time that we spent to learn this vocabulary, it all has to do with conversation. You know, that's just, we're developing the technique and the language to then have that conversation with other musicians. I agree with you. I think it's a problem.
That's why you keep seeing the same. That's why you keep seeing the same cats on all the gigs. That's why I work a lot. I always tell guys, go ahead, keep playing that way, because they just keep calling me. So it's perfect. I love it, man. Even cats want to play odd time. I play odd time, but I make it feel good. What is odd time? It's odd to you because you don't know about it, but it's not odd. It's the same anywhere in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, Willie Jones III, Karriem Riggins, Gregory Hutchinson, Shirazette Tinnin, and Allison Miller. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Mark Ruffin.